Hi everyone, this is Kovid back with another episode of Beyond the Code by Title. Today, it's a unique episode for us and we have some special guests. In fact, we have two amazing guests with us, Mirek and Francis. Both of them are accomplished engineering leaders, but they have one thing in common, their passion for contributing back to the engineering community. And that's why we connected. So Mirek has been on our show previously, but let me introduce him again. He's the newsletter writer for Practical Engineering Management. He's Director of Engineering at Papaya Global. Francis is coming to our show for the first time. He's an engineering leadership coach. He's a seasoned engineering leader and has worked with companies like Heroku, Salesforce, and more. I'm glad to have both of you on the show. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining in.
I think it's good.
Yeah, thank you, Kovid. Hey, Francis. Thanks for having us.
Great. Francis, Mirek, it's a basic format. Like before we jump onto our today's topic of leading dev teams through acquisitions, I think it's great if you could share some of your hobbies, some personal things about yourselves with the audience so that they know you a little more. So we can start with you, Mirek. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like Kovid said, it's my second time in this podcast. But for new people listening to us, my name is Mirek, Miroslav, depending on which pronunciation you prefer. Like Kovid said, recently I'm the director of engineering for the company Papaya Global. I'm also the site leader leading the Polish R&D side of this company. And I also write a newsletter, Practical Engineering Management. Basically, I try to help engineering leaders to maximize impact of their work and make their teams successful. Personally, I'm a father of 3-year-old daughter. So, showing her the way, exploring the world, answering all of the questions. And recently, I'm also becoming a professional athlete. Yes, even having 35 years old, you still can apply for the license. So I'm obstacle races runner. I have some aspirations, maybe, not the box in the Olympics, but still, I'm enjoying the ride and then hopefully I will be able to share some successes over time. Yeah.
All the best.
Me.
All the best. All the best. Thanks, Mirek. Thank you so much for this lovely intro. Francis, your turn, man.
So I'm Francis Lacoste. I'm based in Montreal in Canada. I'm an executive coach working mainly with CTOs and VP of engineering at startups. I help them especially when they need to scale their team. And this is where they need to get really deliberate with culture. This is my passion, really making sure that teams have a great engineering environment, like I have experience. Before that, I was an engineering leader at Salesforce and Heroku, and started my leadership career at Canonical, which was an open source company, the one that made Ubuntu. And this is where I started learning remote management back in the 2000s. Outside of work, I play in an electronic ambient band. I play the hands-free instrument, the theremin, which is the space sound music type of sound that this instrument makes. Also, I have a long practice of meditation, and I now also teach meditation with the Buddhist Geeks, which is an online organization. And it's a pleasure to be here, Kovid. Thank you for inviting me.
Great, Francis. Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely intro. I would love to hear you sing and play the music sometime.
Well, we have a Bandcamp and we're on Spotify, so I can give you the link in the show notes.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Great. Francis, Mirek, we are here today to discuss around the challenges that engineering leaders face post-acquisition. And both of you come with an immense experience. You have spent time in different sized organizations. You have had startups, worked with companies as big as Salesforce, Francis, you just mentioned. I'm sure you have had experiences of acquisition, right? And various types. So to start off, tell us about what kind of acquisition experiences you have had and what were the biggest challenges as an engineering leader or as an engineering team you saw for the company getting acquired?
Well, at Salesforce, there were many acquisitions. I came in with Heroku just after they had been acquired. And the Heroku acquisition was kind of a weird one because it took a very long time. It operated somewhat independently. That was part of the main challenge. The challenge is, how do you integrate the culture? It's an integration problem. The big challenge was an identity one. We're identified as Heroku, but Heroku is now part of Salesforce. How can we be seen? How can we embrace the bigger identity of Salesforce? So that's how I would characterize its sense, the challenge we faced. And it was not inside of it, but inside there were many other acquisitions, some more rapid, where kind of you're acquired and then it's a technology acquisition, so the product kind of shut down very rapidly, things like that. Those are other challenges, but there's still this identity issue that's very present there, because usually people are not happy when losing identity.
Sure. I think we'll come back to you for more details on that and discussing more things in depth. Mirek, what about you?
From my side, basically the company I'm working for recently, Papaya Global, acquired the previous company, Azimo, where I worked for almost 8 years. What was the challenge of the acquisition? I think that the merging process in general. Yeah. So my role in the company was I would say middle level manager, as a director of engineering, who leads individual contributors. Basically, our main challenge was to make sure that the entire know-how, which was acquired by the bigger company, is utilized. Because we came with the know-how, we came with experience and the long stories, ways of working, but it is still in the sphere of the potential which you can give to the company. And as a leader, as a manager, you need to be sure that this potential is somehow utilized. So I think this is the biggest challenge. So finding good places for the skills which you are bringing with you. And, it opens all of the challenges around that. Yeah? So the ones about the organization, the culture, the team structure, and everything. So yeah, this is how it looks like in the general view.
Makes sense. Diving deep a little more into this challenge, how on day-to-day basis are you navigating this situation? And Francis, please feel free to share your opinion, or Mirek, please feel free to discuss anything that you feel should be known to the community also, which you are facing as a challenge today. And Francis comes with a lot of experience. I am sure he would have certain advice on how to navigate this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I've coached people who went through acquisition as well, so that's another source. I think one of the things that is very important to get going is know what is the context of the acquisition. There are multiple reasons for an acquisition. I'd say there are three main ones. So the first one is usually a strategic product acquisition. Your business is acquired because it's seen as complementary. I mean, there's two there. It can be because they want the revenue, so you're in the same space than your competitor, and they just want, the one is acquiring you is kind of a competitor, and they're kind of getting your customers, and they want to add their customers there. That's one strategic acquisition. The other one, which was more like Heroku, and I think in Mirek's case here, is there's a complementary product, so it's kind of Salesforce wanted to expand its reach in the developer space, and Heroku was very at good traction in the developer space. So it was okay. And you see that in Salesforce. You have a portfolio of companies that acquired ExactTarget to add like marketing capabilities, the CRM, Tableau to add analytics. So these are kind of products complementary. And the idea is that when you go to sell to customer, you have like a more comprehensive solution to sell them, so that will drive more revenue to the company. Yeah. So this is like the strategic acquisition. And that will be very different how it goes and how it will go away than these other two, which is higher acquisition, so you're acquiring the company because of that. You want to, usually this will be you acquire a small startup where you're not really interested in their product or their technology or their sales. I want the team. There's and usually it might be one person of the team. There's like somebody has like a very deep expertise. They're not willing. They have a stake in the company. They're not willing to jump ship. So they're going to buy the company so that they can work for the bigger one. That's a very different context than the first two. And the third one is a tech acquisition. There, it's not like you don't really have traction. It's not about your customers or things like that, but there's complementary technology. So they want that tech. You solve one problem for them, and instead of building it by themselves, they will buy you. And depending on that context, it will change a lot of how the acquisition will go. But what's your experience, Mirek? Was it more a technology acquisition, a talent acquisition, or a strategic acquisition?
Well, I think in the end, those types of acquisitions, they have a lot of in common, because you can acquire product, but in the end, there are people behind the product. So even if you have this piece of technology, you still need to have those talented people who can maintain that, who can plug it into the new structures, and who can continue the growth. I think that we are kind of mixing both things. Obviously, we extended the new company portfolio, but we also brought fresh talent, new perspectives, and fresh know-how to the problems, which can be also the strategic problems for the company. Company wants to grow, company wants to extend their portfolio. So bringing, fresh talents who spend years building this or that can be a part of this acquisition.
Cool. Francis, do you have any question that you wanted to ask Mirek?
I think Mirek is right here in the sense that these three types that I said, or four, if you did the first two, they will often overlap. This is what was interesting about the Heroku experience. Heroku was a strategic acquisition. So what it means is that the first thing that they do is they will usually give autonomy to the product team, because you don't want to kill the golden goose. And that creates a challenge, because then it will mean that you will have like kind of two independent or semi-independent organization going by. And in Heroku's case, it took basically 7 years to complete the integration. That's not true. Like 5 years after I joined, for the first 5 years, the technology team, Heroku had its own CEO, and it was reporting in the product organization. So the Heroku engineering organization was totally separate than the rest of the Salesforce and our engineering organization. And what we've seen is that when they did other acquisition, that changed. In some acquisition, the technology organization is trying to be merged. And this is where you kind of get these process, because you need to, as if you're independent, you can have these processes going on here and these processes going on over that place. And that's fine. Unless you need to align roadmaps, there will be friction, but those are friction you need to deal with. Whereas if you're acquiring the technology, then the first thing that we'll do, or the talent, it's kind of, we don't care about how you're working. Usually how it goes is that they will kind of say, here's how we work, and you need to align with that. Sure, we're open. And then there's a challenge of how can we influence the culture as the acquisition, because you have good things and there's a size. So it's usually the smaller ones to influence the bigger one, but that's very hard. And it will really depend on how you're able to hook into the process, build the relationships, all of these things. So even though all the problems will happen at some point, the schedule on which they will happen, these integration, will differ based on the integration types. Because the first thing they do when it's a product, at acquisition, usually you can expect like they will merge the sales team rapidly. And in Heroku case, that was a while. But in the other acquisitions, first thing, it didn't take long that the sales team at ExactTarget, or the sales team, the go-to-market of Tableau, were integrated in the go-to-market, the general go-to-market. Because you want to go to the customer with a unified product offering, even if the tech, the customer experience is we're using two different products here,
Right. Coming back to Mirek's challenge after the acquisition, having the capacity utilization done properly, is that something that you have also experienced? And is there anything specific that you have done at that point of time? Because I can also feel this, that as soon as there is an acquisition done, there is a lot of context to gain. There are a lot of things for people to first get on board with, and then see how teams can be utilized at every level. And the operating style of every company that comes in would be different, right? So there are multiple areas where you need to first get yourself onboarded after the acquisition and then ensure that everyone is utilized in the right place. So Francis, question to you, have you experienced such a thing and how did you navigate that situation?
Yeah, I mean, Heroku's acquisition was kind of special in that case, because these questions really took years to materialize. So Heroku engineering and Heroku product were split, and then engineering went into to report into the general engineering org, and same thing with product. And then these questions started to add them. And then there's these things. Okay, well, is that capacity here, can we use it for something else? Do we want, this is less prioritized? And the challenge there were kind of often there's not a lot of knowledge, or you have to explain how your product and your technology fit together. And you have to understand how you need really to dive into the understanding of each part.
Yeah.
And especially in a big organization, the decisions are made without really the details of the context. So they will say, oh, we can cut that, or we're going to add them, but then it has a huge impact on the product.
It is not looked at deeply. Yeah.
This is critical infrastructure. I mean, it doesn't seem to be much, but if we don't develop this, then we're going to have problems. These things are going to have problems, things like that, dependency. And at the same time, there's often not a lot of understanding of the other side of what is it trying to achieve. So the advice I would give is really to understand, if you're being acquired, you need to understand very rapidly what is the business of the acquirer, the company making the acquisition, how to affect it, and how you fit into that, because you cannot really rely on them understanding what's going on in you. So it kind of, you need to understand them so that you can make your case to them, in the terms that they understand.
Right. Mirit, for you, after the acquisition, you were heading the engineering team there. When you moved here, the developers, the team members who were working with you, did they have an expectation from you, or were they looking up to you to sort their lives into this new space? And what exactly you did? Like, I want to know, like, your first-hand experience there. Like, what exactly you did to solve these problems for them, and help them get onto track, or maybe you are getting them onto track right now. I don't know. Just share that experience.
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges for me as not the senior manager, like I said, the mid-level manager, is that I got a lot of questions with the expectations that I have answered to all of them, which obviously wasn't true. So obviously, when the company is acquired, I assume that on the strategic level, you have product. So the senior management thinks how to use this product in their strategy. You have pool of talents, so they think how to utilize those talents, and they think like long term. My role was bridging this gap between those strategic decisions, which were still, in discussions. Basically, my work was to bridge that with leaders and engineers to translate that to their basically day-to-day, activities. It's very similar to the thing which you do as a fresh manager in a company. Yeah? So what you need to do in first 100 days, for example. Yeah? So I assume that you need to learn as much as possible about business or the product. You need to understand what are the problems of the company that you need to solve. And then looking on your team, on the individuals, you need to find the best fit for their skills in the scope of problems which company has. Like I said at the beginning, we are joining the company with some experience, with track record, but we need to somehow build this credibility, because this is just the potential, and we need to find a way how to utilize this potential, how to start providing the value. So basically, my 100 days were full of one-on-ones with people on all of the positions, from software engineers to their managers, to the directors, to also product people, marketing people, data people, and other, to build the context. For example, one of the projects which I led at the very beginning, post-acquisition, was building front-end infrastructure, because we realized that with the monolithic system which we had back then, we couldn't move as fast as possible. And actually, this was one of the know-how which we brought to the organization because we did some kind of that stuff in the past. So, next to those big strategic things, the product and the entire talent pool, we also brought some, very specific experiences. And actually, there was a problem in the company which we could solve with that. 1.5 years later, I can say that our entire front-end application is built on top of micro front-ends. We have tens of those comparing to the single one year ago. So this went well. But like I said, it had to start with understanding that this is the real problem of the company, and we have resources, we have experience, we have people who can address just that. Yeah. So this was one of the few experiences I had at the beginning of the acquisition.
Perfect. I think great job there, first of all. And one thing that I feel is that when you have traveled this journey, there is always some looking back and saying, okay, I could have done this better, right? So is there anything of that sort, Marek, which you think you could share as an experience with the audience that this is something that you could do better? Like broadly, I feel you did the best thing. And as Francis also said, first you have to understand the business, understand the need. That's the very fundamental. And you got onto that point very right, having one-on-ones and aligning the teams, bridging that gap, bringing everyone on board, right? So this is amazing. But if there was anything else that you could have done, and whatever you did, if you could do it better in some or the other way.
I think that one of the super important things which I underestimated at the beginning is quick merger of the, I would say, company's culture. So as long as you have us and them, and we work this way and they work that way, it's super hard to navigate. So, the truth is that usually bigger organization, which is more bureaucratic, more formalized, is acquiring smaller organization, which usually moves faster, but also, they are moving faster and break things.
Yeah.
So
there are pros and cons.
Yeah. So I think that those are the, non-technical challenges that you should address from the day one to bridge this gap, to stop talking us versus them, to see how quickly we can become a one organization focused on a single goal. Because rather than, expecting the company to adjust to us, we need to find a way how to influence, how to bring our experience to help changing the culture which works for all of us, rather than telling, okay, we work this way and then now the new way is not that effective, so I cannot, push anymore once a day because of this or that or that. So I think that my role as a leader would be to answer all of those questions. Why we cannot push that fast as we did in the past? Why we have more compliance rules? Why this or that? I think that this is the thing that I should do more at the beginning of the acquisition. Just provide all of the needed context to the former team or the organization to help them become, good, empowered employees of the new organization. This is it.
I agree completely with what Mirek said, and this is similar to what we would have done differently. I think for us, it took really too long. We stayed like us with them for way too long, and it was still going on, when I left Heroku. In my last year, it was kind of, this was what I was trying to get the team. It was, we don't know what is Heroku's mission. And I was kind of, look, we get briefed every year at the company kickoff, which is this big event at Salesforce where we have the strategy of the year, and we want to know what is our business. We need to listen to that and tell how we fit into that. What is our contribution? Salesforce is in the business of digital transformation. How do we help customers with their digital transformation? And Heroku has a big part to play with app development there. But us and them is strong. And this is where I said at the beginning, it's an identity problem. And there's kind of the acquisition, the fact that you're successful because you're having an exit, especially the founder are having an exit there. Usually you're bought, even if it's not for the valuation you were expecting, you're still, we're a big deal. We got acquired, and at that time, like I said, I wasn't there at the acquisition, but when Salesforce acquired Heroku, I mean, in Hacker News and all sorts of that, people were saying, oh, Heroku is acquiring Salesforce because Heroku had a lot of cred. And I've seen other acquisition where there's some sense of pride and arrogance as being the smaller being. And we are a startup, we're nimble, we're really, I mean, we have traction. This is why we got acquired. So they should listen to us. We know a lot. They don't. So there's some arrogance and pride there. But the truth is, especially the bigger the differential, we need to get some humility and really start to get interested about, okay, why is there these? Because bureaucracy, I mean, it's funny when I was thinking, well, Mirek, usually what is appreciated by this startup is the HR policies of the bigger corporation, because they have more formal, have better insurance, self-insurance, all that. That's usually, oh, this is great. But then it's, okay, this is how you should deploy to production, because there's compliance issues, and usually the bigger one will have to deal with this. Oh no, so we need as startups entering this world to kind of really get the humility of, okay, we probably have something to learn from them, and it's on us to understand what are the pain points and how we can solve these problems. I love Mirek's story around the front end development. It's a great example. That was a thing, and this is how we can solve it. I mean, Heroku was not successful in that way. I mean, we kind of knew how to do deployments and all of that, but we were not really able to solve the deployment problems for Salesforce as a whole. And so Salesforce did its own Heroku, and because Heroku, we were not interested. So the arrogance is at the leadership level. So you need to jump ship now, because Chip has trouble. Sorry, you need to jump ship in a way and embrace the new culture, because otherwise you become like very protective of what you have, and that's, I mean, down the line, it's not good. I mean, you see it. Usually people will stick for their golden end, their leaders stick for the golden end cups, and then they leave, because they were not able really to integrate and find the value in that. And the people who stayed are kind of miserable. So it's, yeah.
Totally. One thing you just mentioned around like how that cultural difference plays a role at different aspects of how you are operating. So it could be something related to the hierarchy. People moving from a team which is small to a large organization would be happy about the HR policies, as you just mentioned. So I have had an experience of working with an MNC, and I have had an experience of working with a startup, right? The problem is that everyone, even the MNCs want, or large scale organization want, that the team should move faster, right? Of course, without breaking things. And startups usually move faster, even though they break things, but they move faster. So when this culture shift happens, that a startup gets acquired by a large scale organization, keeping the team motivated, who have been like working with such a good pace and releasing features, having that clarity on what they are doing, seeing that impact, how does that transition work? Like, I need to understand some detail around that part. Maybe Francis, Mirek, anyone of you can answer on that. Like, how do you keep your teams motivated with the fact that, okay, now we were running at 100, it's gonna be 50 now, right? That things could slow down for us, and still you need to keep them motivated onto that journey. How would you do that?
So from my experience during the acquisition, as an individual contributor, you either join the existing team. So this is basically like you would be hired to this company. Or the other way is you stay as the entire team, as the entire entity, and you build your stuff, and your job is only to expose an interface or any ways of integrating your stuff with the rest of the product, with the rest of the business. I think that the second scenario is easier, because you can still build things in your way. You can still have your, ceremonies, ways of working. Sometimes you even keep the entire, SDLC process or the tech stack. This is nice. You're just taking care of exposing the API or the contract or whatever. When you join the team as an individual, I think it's a good exercise for the company which acquired to see how their onboarding processes worked for this particular person. So I personally look at the things of how quickly you can commit to production, for example. Yeah? How much you need to learn. Do you have those materials which you can learn from? And then how you can utilize them to push even the one line change to production. If you touch the production, it's a success because you went the entire way, and then you can start generating the real value and expand. Yeah, so I personally assume that the best motivation to people is to give them the possibility to generate value. And like I said, those are two ways of I would say, maximizing that.
Yeah.
And this is basically my experience from last.
No, totally makes sense. Yeah. What's your take on this, Francis?
Yeah, I mean, I agree here again. The choice between the two will depend, is not necessarily in your hands, unfortunately. I mean, if you're able to maintain autonomy, it's more will depend on the context of the acquisition. Or if it's like, we want to keep this product, and so they won't refactor the teams, or they will try to maintain the team autonomous, at least for a while, so that the product can continue to grow and develop. If it's like more a technical or strategy or hiring acquisition, then you cannot really expect autonomy. And then you leveraging the onboarding process and that. And it's hard because, I mean, you're really changing things for folks. And the trick is that even with the autonomy, there's a clock ticking. You might not be aware of it because there's an autonomy, but autonomy is as always an expiration thing. In Heroku, it was like a lot of years. Most of other acquisition, usually it's more like a year, 18 months, 6 months, and there will be, you're on a timeline. And what is tough there as a leader is that you're expecting to continue building the product as you are, and you're expecting implicitly or explicitly to integrate with the rest of the engineering org. You want to get ahead of it. Even if it's like just in 6 months or a year, you want to start building the relationships. How is it that you're doing planning? How is it that you're pushing to production? What is the integration aspect? And while at the same time keeping your team autonomous, but you want to initiate these relationships. Yeah, I mean, this is what I would have liked to do differently.
Yeah, I understand that point, and I think it's good actually. See, setting the expectations brings a lot of more certainty to the situation, and people get prepared for it. So it definitely makes sense. First is that you give them that positive side of being there, keep them motivated, and set the expectations right for the future so that they are prepared for it. So I think that's one good way of moving around.
There's something I want to add, because I think I didn't feel I answered really your initial question, which was about how do we maintain the speed and agility, of the original context. And the truth is there, unfortunately, is that to maintain speed, you need autonomy. If you're trying to centralize everything, this is when you centralize decision making, that things get slow and you get bogged down in like all of the coordination process to make a decision. And this is what's plaguing larger organization. And so there is an organizational philosophy and management. So there is an uphill battle there, because large organizations that can move fast will have a lot of autonomy to be decentralized decision making. And that's not really what is like the common thinking in larger organization management. So this is why it's often unsuccessful. If you add up like the centralized decision making and the centralized process, you end up with these slow things, and that's just the nature of it, kind of. So that's the challenge.
Maybe just looking at the bright side would be the only option. Like looking at the HR policies, then.
and I mean, there are various. The trick, and this is why I insist on the relationship building, because I mean, especially the larger the organization, the more you can build some autonomy, even though officially there's only a single way to do it. In practice, there will be multiple ways because of the history of acquisition and all of that. So you can, if you know this, if you have the relationships when you did your inventory of the lay of the land, then okay, well, I can gain more autonomy here and help steer that part of the organization into something that is more sane, so you can influence the culture, but you're not going to transform it. 6 months here. It's like you're starting a journey to nudge a little bit the larger organization toward saner practice. We saw that at Heroku, especially around remote work. When I joined, it was to build a remote culture there. And when the pandemic hit and Salesforce, the larger Salesforce organization, there was a lot of interest. What can we learn from Heroku? Because they've done that. So our experience was welcome, and we were able to shift things, in that area around remote work, a little bit like Mirek was able to do around like the front end development. So this is why understanding what are the pain points where we can contribute and help these micro shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Making sense. All right, moving on to one last piece of our discussion today around the acquisitions. This is a time of transition, turmoil. Leaders themselves are figuring out that space, that foot into the new organization and trying to set up things with the existing team and the new coming team. In this time, how do you think you can look at the efficiency of an engineering team? How can you go about measuring it? Or maybe you should not measure it because there could be other aspects to look at that point of time. How do you ensure that the people who are getting paid are delivering the value in that moment of transition? And how do you ensure that people are efficient?
So from my perspective, I take into consideration those 4 stages of team development. Yeah? So we have forming, storming, norming, and performing. And I assume that if the company is acquired, it's mature enough, fast moving enough. So I assume they are close to performing stage, where you measure the efficiency, speed, you can implement DORA metrics, measure number of deployments, whatever. But when you are acquired, I assume that you are coming back to the forming phase. So yeah, obviously, if you stay as a single team, a single entity, you still can move really, really fast. You can keep deploying your stuff, every single day to production. You are moving fast, but the question is if you are moving in the right direction. Yeah. So that's why you can still keep measuring those things. But I think that at the beginning, of forming, you need to get to know people, company, business, and everything, so you understand how you can contribute to the company's success rather than just moving fast into totally random direction. So I would came back to my answers from a few minutes ago. I would measure the onboarding time, basic stuff, how quickly you can, commit to production, because, you need to get access to your repositories. You need to go through all of the documentations and stuff like that. In the meantime, just learning the company, learning the teams, your, colleagues and everything. Then obviously you will go to the storming phase where everyone is debating on the ways of working and why we don't work this way, but that way and so on. But, after this turbulent time, then you can come back to the performing phase where you are optimizing, but only when you know that you are going to the right direction.
Makes sense. Perfect. What's your take on this, Francis?
Well, what I'd add, again, it depends, it's really understanding how does the acquiring organization answers that question, because they probably have already a framework of how they're thinking about performance, how they're doing performance management, for instance. That's also one of the usually source of friction. We like the HR process, but not necessarily the performance, the way they do performance management, because they have a very formalized one. Our smaller organization was a little smaller. So in a way, kind of understanding how these questions are framed and processed at the bigger level, and then seeing, okay, how is that compatible with us? How are we going to need to adjust? And if you're doing already that, so that, because there will be an event mismatch that will need to be negotiated. And if you want to negotiate it, you'll have to get ahead of it, because otherwise the expectation you'll just use ours.
Yeah.
That's very common. The other, around that question, often it will be removing duplication. It's not so much is everybody is busy, because everybody's busy in our company. Now, the question, like Mirek said, is kind of, are they busy on the right stuff? And this is where I always recommend looking more for output. What are the outcomes? I mean, not output, actually, outcome, more than like the busyness, or are people timesheet, or that, number of pull requests, or number of lines of code, or all of these metrics, which are kind of irrelevant in many ways. But really, what are the business? Are we meeting our business outcomes? Giving transparency on how we're making progress on those, so that they can have conversation. But often what happens is more kind of, you have a platform engineering team in your startup, and we have a platform engineering, so we're just going to merge those, because obviously you should not have two platform engineering teams. I mean, that's kind of naive, but also source of multiple confusion. But this is also conversation you need to they're going to come. So you want to say, okay, what is this platform engineering doing? What is their charter? How is it compatible with ours or not? Is merging really the right thing? So getting these collaboration going between peers at the startup and the bigger. If the team has talked and have kind of an idea, when the exec coming and say you need to merge, you can actually, this is how we think we should be doing it. And then it's much easier, because the people with the maximum understanding of the context and the details are able to weigh in on the decision.
Yeah. So here, let's take your example here, Francis. When Heroku got merged to Salesforce, there were certain performance practices you would be already taking up, right? And then there would be something that Salesforce enforces on the team, right? There must be some clash over there. Can you give us an example of that? And how did you, as a leader, navigate your team and align them towards that? So it completely changes the way you are thinking, how you're incentivized to do something in a team, right? And if that happens, it's a big shift, according to me. How do you handle that? Would be something that I would like.
Yeah, I mean, two examples of that were like the performance management, which, I mean, Salesforce didn't have a very formal one at the beginning. It came in later, but Heroku had its one. The way they do promotions and things like that. So it was, okay, we need to align more towards that. And it was understanding this process, understanding how we do, and then there's that phase where how can we kind of keep the spirit and the principles we have into that different process and hybridize the two. Another one was the career ladders. So we had our own career ladders. And then there's kind of the, okay, well, these are different roles, harmonizing that. Often, I mean, the biggest job was managing expectations on both sides. Basically, what we had was like an interpretation. This is that level. Here's what that level means here. And you were seeing that, even though officially that's kind of, you should not be doing that. I mean, the HR folks really hate that. But in practice, contexts are different, and you need to have that adaptation. So even though it was not recognized, it was happening all over the organization. It's not like just Heroku were doing that. You had other teams also when they're kind of commentary on the official career ladder.
Yeah, of course. That's that. Great, guys. I am out of my questions for now. It was lovely discussing all these challenges with you and having a discussion on all those practical tips that you shared. Any parting advice from both of you for the engineering leaders who are in a similar situation, what they should be doing, what they should be taking as next steps?
So from my perspective, I would say that your role as a leader is to find the good match between the skills you are bringing to the new company, your team, the know-how, the solutions, the product, to the problems which new company has, and start from doing that. Start from showing what's the value of your staff in a context of new reality. And the quicker you sort it out, the quicker you become, successful in the new organization.
That's a very good tip. So two things for me. The first, most practical one is get conversation going. Look at finding the org chart, people who are in similar roles, or where you can see that, oh, if I were to look at this and it looks similar and I want to merge these things, start talking with these teams. To get your team actually talking to these teams. Just to get to know each other, to learn from each other, that sort of thing. Very informal kind of thing. It is just encourage cross-organization conversation, because that makes everything easier afterwards. You get to know people, you get to relate to them as humans. They're not like a dem who wants to beat you or things like that. So just encourage multilateral conversation between similar roles and similar things, between engineers across all the board. So conversation. Then same thing with the leader. The other aspect that I say kind of keep in mind, there's an identity shift that needs to happen. From we are this company to we are this bigger company. The mission is changing, that sort of thing. And when there is an identity shift, there will be a grieving process, because you're losing an identity and you're embracing a new one. So be prepared to accompany the people in that journey, of kind of losing this is how we were and this is our startup times and things like that. The loss of that, because it's a real loss, it will be an emotional impact. And then so kind of acknowledging it and normalizing it, supporting people through it, and helping them to embrace the bigger identity that, hey, this is the new mission, this is the bigger, we can do more things together.
Totally. I think both of you, thanks a lot for such great piece of advices. Thank you. Let's keep this passion of contributing to the community going, and let's build great dev teams together, man.
Thank you so much, Kovid, for providing this space.
Thanks.
Thank you.